Welcome back to the Poll Position. If you like what you see, then don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment below. I have the tags for my social media platforms listed in the description below. This channel is all about polling. It's in the name after all. But is polling correct? And can it be trusted, or is it a waste of time? Are the polls just a way for political organisations and openly biased news outlets to control discourse around elections in order to benefit their side? The answer is a little more complicated than you think, but first we should try to explain what a poll is and how they work. An opinion poll is a sample of data taken from a select section of people that tries to gauge the opinions of a much wider group, such as a country's voting age population in the case of the polls that we look at here. Polls aren't just used to gauge public opinion of politicians, but can also be used for all sorts of things that range from measuring public satisfaction with the National Health Service to measuring who the most popular movie star is with filmgoers. The number of potential questions a poll can ask is basically limitless, but it should be noted that polls are not a perfect form of research. The first issue is that they are only a method of quantitative research. This means that they are useful in garnering a wide quantity of answers, but do not provide detailed enough answers to paint a detailed picture of how individual people feel. Although polls do almost always ask numerous questions, respondents are rarely able to make more than one-word answers to complex questions like they would in a qualitative study, like a focus group or an interview. The benefit of quantitative research, and why it is still generally better for election research, is that such studies provide a wider picture of the electorate that cannot be achieved by qualitative methods such as case studies or focus groups. Another great component of polls are the crosstabs. This is the full data set which shows you data about the different respondents, like their age group, gender, party affiliation, and economic status. This information is given voluntarily and is kept anonymous to adhere to ethical guidelines and provides a lot of insight into what kinds of people are voting and what their priorities might be going into an election. This brings us on to a key component of polls, that being sample size. Polls generally try to get a balance of people that roughly reflects the electorate, with a sample size that is large enough to be within a reasonable margin of error, i.e. the margin of difference between the poll and the actual result. Generally speaking, pollsters believe this number to be between 1 and 2,000, as it is large enough to have a wide range of people, but small enough not to have a skewed result, as a sample size that is too large must be near perfectly fine-tuned as to not over- or underrepresent certain groups. The issue is that many polls do not follow this rule, and thus their margin of error is much larger. Arguably the best type of poll is an MRP poll. Multi-level regression post-stratification polls are polls that take a huge sample of people from across the country in an attempt to build a model of how a country will vote in an election if the results were replicated. Although they are not perfect at predicting individual races, MRP polling is generally the best, as they take demographic and geographic data more into account in their models. The main issue with these polls are the variation between the pollsters, like when some pollsters in the UK general election predicted Labour could win upwards of 480 seats, whilst other MRPs predicted a victory closer to 430 seats. As you can see, there's a bit of an inconsistency. However, this is largely accommodated for by the aggregates. An aggregate is a voting intention tracker that plots an average result from a large collection of polls, which takes into account things like sample size. As a result, these aggregates tend to be much more accurate than most individual polls. A big issue with polling is that it is often used by biased organisations to create a result that they want in order to influence the election in their favour. This is particularly common in the US with groups like Trafalgar Group, who have been accused of being a partisan pollster for the Republican Party, and regularly post polls that are more favourable for the Republicans on average, whilst not publishing their crosstab data. It should be noted that this is not the case for most pollsters, as almost every poll you see, and certainly the ones I cover, have crosstab data that's easily accessible to the public. But what am I saying with all this? I'm saying that polls don't actually predict the future, and they do have their flaws. With any form of research, polls are limited by certain parameters and do not provide a perfect picture. Polls have got it wrong, like in 2016, where almost no one expected Donald Trump to sweep the Democratic heartlands in the Rust Belt, or in 1992, in the UK, where a hung parliament led by a Labour government was the expected outcome, and a moderately sized Conservative majority was the result. But polls do have value, and they are still the best research method for elections. It's always worth questioning the reliability of polling, but generally speaking, it is the best way to get a clear picture of how an election will pan out. Polls allow both campaigns and the public to see if messages are cutting through, and what priorities really matter to voters. They provide transparency in an age where it's often more difficult to understand political discourse and disseminate misinformation. More than anything, they provide a fascinating glimpse into the world of elections and the ever-changing political landscape we find ourselves in. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. As always, have a great day and I'll see you next time.